All right, it says that we are live. I didn't do the countdown. Is it supposed to?
It normally does a countdown, but maybe it decided just to
Yeah.
just agree with you a little bit that it wouldn't bother.
Right? It's just like, whatever. Here we go.
It's not worried about you.
No. All right. Hello, everyone. The one person who is watching now. But welcome to my YouTube channel, Maggie Elram, Wiccan Moon here. And I'm here tonight with the lovely Mandi See. Say hello, Mandy. Yes, and tonight we are going to be talking a lot about Beltane and all that kind of stuff. Morgan Atwood says hello. Hello, Morgan.
Hello.
And yeah, we just want to kind of get together and hang out and chill and talk about the holiday a little bit.
Yeah, awesome. That's what I was promised.
Yes. So I'm sorry. I'm trying to get it to where I can see our chat and everything. I'll just pull that up on my
later, because I knew that we were going to talk about Beltane. So I've written down a couple of my favorite books for Beltane, but I'll share them later. But if you remind me that later.
Yes.
I've written down because I thought I want to make sure. And I've written down a couple of other random things as well to try and make sure I remember them.
Oh, cool. Well, let's should we wait just a minute and get some more people in here, see if anyone else wants to show up? How was your day today, Mandi? What all did you do today?
My day was really good. I had my course today, where I teach a course online, and it was supposed to be yesterday and I wasn't very well, so I rescheduled for today. And I was kind of hoping that today would be like my course and then some Beltane stuff as well, so we could all have a little bit of a celebration together. And then, just as luck would have it, only one person came.
Aww.
I was just like, oh, but it was okay. Hi, Featherwitch.
Hi, Featherwitch. Yeah, so let me, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell everybody where they can find you and what you do and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I am Mandi. My name is Mandi See, and I have a website which is holistichearts.org. I'm sure Maggie will put it in the description bar or whatever afterwards, because she's nice like that. And I have a YouTube channel, and basically what I do is I'm a holistic counsellor and life coach, and I also do professional tarot readings, and I do different courses and different workshops about eclectic Wicca. So it is from a Wiccan standpoint at the very core, but everything that I do is that eclectic Wiccan aspect as opposed to tradition. I teach about tradition, but then I teach about being eclectic and eclecticism in terms of how you can incorporate that into your own spiritual life and into your own religious practice. And then my YouTube channel is basically an extension of that. My YouTube channel is where I give information away for free, because I feel like it's nice when somebody wants to work with you, when they want to give somebody their hard-earned money, that you actually get to see who that's going to beforehand. And really kind of judge them in a way, judge them in a sense of who they are. So I think that's a nice way to be able to do it.
Cool, super cool. And what was the name of your website again?
It's holistichearts.
Okay, cool. And I have that down in the description below. What now?
Yeah. I wanted to take it away from just my name and have it as more something that kind of described what I do. And everything I do is generally from a heart chakra space. And it is in terms of those holistic therapies. Like, I'm also a certified neuro-linguistic programming practitioner and crystal healing and aura and chakra therapy and stuff like that. So it is all holistic, the stuff that I do.
Cool. Let me just take care of something really quick. Sorry, no spell ever could do that. Anyway.
Lovely rude comments.
Right?
To just love that. Maybe, but I don't think it would help. Anyway, I guess right time of year to be asking those questions. For those of you watching this later, we just got a rather rude question, can you give me a spell to do this type of question. But I suppose at any time of year he's thinking about making home improvements, Beltane is the right time of year.
He wanted to elongate his maypole.
Yeah. How funny. At least he was brave enough to say it. Not many are.
That's true. That's true. Hi, Valena Love. And
hello.
So, okay, so let's get started with some of the questions. I told you guys we wanted to talk about Beltane, and Mandi has literally written a book on eclectic Wicca. And so why don't you...
Yeah, I wrote all of my notes in the back of my books. I didn't have any spare paper.
Perfect. Why don't you go ahead and give us kind of like a brief, like generalized description of Beltane and what it is and all that kind of stuff.
So Beltane is a fertility festival, and I think you could say that that is the main thing that throughout different cultures, traditions and times hasn't changed, because different people around the world celebrate different holidays on this same date, such as the church with May Day, and it's originally all coming from the same place. So I found out, this was actually something I did not know, that the maypole was actually originally a German tradition. And it was originally a tree, and people would dance naked around the tree as a ritual of fertility. And that was originally a German thing. And then something similar happens in Sweden, but they have it on a different date. So depending on where you are in the world and what tradition you follow, Beltane can be pronounced differently, spelt differently. I think the original Gaelic, and I've written this down, I'm probably going to butcher it, is Beltane. Is the original Gaelic for Beltane, but it's now got a million different spellings and lots of different words for it. And it can be celebrated from the 30th of April to May the 1st, sometimes just celebrated on May the 1st, and sometimes it wouldn't be celebrated until the hawthorn blossomed and there was mayflowers, and that was the day that they celebrated Beltane, was the day that the mayflowers came out, because it was officially then Beltane, whereas now we have it kind of lodged in our calendar. And the Celtic word for it is the fires of Bel, and Bel was a god. Bel is I don't know how you pronounce it, Akkadian god, that I really don't know much about, so I can't kind of share too much about that. But initially it is at the core a fertility festival for everywhere. They just celebrate in different ways. Even the maypole that we have now, we have it in England, we have it as part of the church, is this red and white kind of colours. I don't know if that's what it's like in America. But the red and white of a maypole is to symbolize the semen of the man and the blood of the virgin. So even when you have, like children from church dancing around the maypole, that's what they're dancing for. It's fertility. That was the point. So there's lots of different things with Beltane. For example, if you're in the northern hemisphere, it's Beltane. If you're in the southern hemisphere, right now it's Samhain that people are celebrating. And so obviously in the northern hemisphere, we celebrate Samhain at the time of October 31st, because that is when the veil of the worlds is supposed to be the thinnest. But if you're in the southern hemisphere and you're celebrating it at a different time of the year, that still holds a very valuable kind of it's still very high in value in terms of a death festival. And so you've got this link between the southern and the northern hemisphere, where they have the opposite of what's going on with us, but they're still very connected. So May Day or Beltane or this time in May can be seen as much as a death festival as a life festival. It's fertility, which brings everything to being, but also, at some point everything's going to go, and that's kind of acknowledged as well in the southern hemisphere's Samhain. So I think that there's elements that bridge the two, very much like sacrifice and things like that bridge the two, the physical sacrifice that you make in terms of death potentially, or the sacrifice that you make in terms of having children. at this time of year, the cow is a big symbol, the cow or the bull, one representing the female, one representing the male. It's very much, we're looking at that strength at this time of year, that kind of peak time, that being the most of what you can ever be to give. The god and the goddess are in their kind of, they are in their prime. One day more and it will be kind of, you know, in some way they are at their prime. And so with the animals out in nature at this time, you're looking at what you can get from them, or certainly were originally. It's not necessarily a popular view now. It's not a very vegan view, but the cow was regarded as kind of the highest symbol of fertility, because the cow produced leather, meat, milk. It ploughed the lands for them, you know, it gave birth. It was just the ultimate at the time. And so the cow is often a symbol of Beltane. And the cow, kind of the shape of the cow's horns and then the cow's head, is a symbol in itself of that triple goddess of the crescent moon. So the cow comes into Beltane a lot. And in terms of how people celebrate, it's, you know, it varies nowadays, because obviously it's modern day, but it varies now. You still can go to some kind of older style traditions where there isn't necessarily sex. Maybe a coven would do that if they wanted to, but you will go and play the fertility game. So whether it's men chasing women or different things like that, where originally it would have been kind of men chasing women to have sex with, but the women would have been kind of consenting as well. It would have been kind of like a virgin thing, and a big fertility festival, and it would have been an honor to take part in it, kind of thing.
That's super cool. So one thing that you said that I didn't realize, I guess, is that the whole like tradition of the maypole and everything, where you're at least, is still celebrated by the church. Is that true?
Yeah, they celebrate on the 1st of May.
That is too cool. I had no idea. See, where I've never honestly been to any type of like Beltane festival or anything like that openly, because they don't have anything like that available around here where I'm at.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things I've done in the past, which I mostly just observe now, you know, I don't really see myself as Wiccan or anything like that. So I don't really celebrate in the like traditional Wicca type of way. But in the past, when it was something that I did follow, I always really enjoyed that symbolism of the maypole. And I think I had even read things where, you know, just, you know, whenever you're like digging the hole and like putting the pole into the ground, like even that, you know, has its own like fertility symbolism that goes along with it.
And there's actually a, I've never tried it. I can't comment on it, but there's actually a sex position apparently for Beltane, which is symbolized in the maypole with the overlapping. And the idea is that you are so kind of intertwined with one another that you are, you know, having sex in that nature. That is supposed to be represented by the maypole. Now, I've never done that. I don't know if that's something that people would do at large festivals or if it's like a more personal thing, but I think that's quite interesting, the idea that there's actually something to represent that. I think that's cool.
That is cool. I've never heard of that either. I'm gonna have to look that up whenever we're done. Like maypole sex positioning.
Yeah, like maybe if it's because I don't know if it's maypole or if it's Beltane. I know that it's about the fertility aspect, but I don't know if it's like if you do it in that position, you're like more likely to become pregnant or something. I don't know.
Maybe I won't do that then.
Yeah, there was a thing, like I guess, what do you call it, like a superstition that if you were to have sex on the festival of Beltane, that you would more than likely fall pregnant, and there was this thing, and so people would avoid doing it if they didn't want to, or people that had been really struggling with becoming pregnant would like make a big deal of the fact that they were going to do it at Beltane. And I find that interesting, because obviously you've got the logic side of things that tells you that you can only, sorry, I'm going to have to let the dog out.
Sure. Well, and that's something, while she's gone, that's something that I wanted to talk about as well, is like how literal the fertility aspect of Beltane really is. And I I know for me, it's something that I always took as a very literal kind of thing because, you know, this time of year where I'm from, like it's the weather, it gets really hot and it just has that like amped up, like sexy kind of vibe that goes along with it anyways, I think. You know, everything is blooming, like the trees have like spermed everywhere, all over everything. And, you know, it's just a huge like surge of energy at this time that can really be compared to, you know, sex and fertility and all that kind of stuff. So what are your thoughts on that, Mandy?
I think that, like you said, it's like a sexy time of year, isn't it? Like it's sexy in and of itself. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm just going to have to let this dog outside. I literally just opened the door.
The joys of owning pets. Hello, Noah. I see that you're in there too. What do you guys think? Do you guys have any questions or comments on what we're talking about? Just let us know.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Sorry, what was the question? I'm totally distracted now.
Just how you think about it being taken literally as far as the fertility and sex aspect of the holiday.
I think it depends entirely on the person. Obviously, it can be taken very literal, and people have celebrated that way, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But then it can also be simply a representation. You know, planting a seed to grow a flower in your garden is no less involved in fertility than it is to physically have a baby yourself. It's the idea of creation, it's the idea of life. And if we're following the idea that no one life is more important than another, then it shouldn't really matter if it's a human being or if sex is involved in any way, or if fertility is being viewed, because I think it can be viewed separately. I think you can view fertility in terms of sex, but then you can also view fertility in terms of the giving of life. And sex is not necessarily something that has to happen with that. You know, for example, if you're somebody that never plans on having children yourself or physically can't have children yourself, but you are somebody that still definitely wants children in your life, then you can still celebrate fertility. You know, it's the idea that you're celebrating it maybe for somebody else and you think that it's a fascinating concept, but you don't have to necessarily to celebrate fertility have to physically want to have sex or want to have a baby yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And as somebody who like does not want to have children myself, I find that even in the past, whenever I did celebrate this holiday, you know, even if I did use like sex magic or something like that in celebration, it was never to like become impregnated or anything like that. It was more of a symbol to give life to like the new like ideas and like goals or whatever it was that I was trying to accomplish.
Yeah,
your remaining year. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I think that it can be seen in many ways, and I think it is always about I mean, this is what I would say being an eclectic Wiccan, but I think it is always about the individual. And I think that I don't really know how to sum it up best. I guess that, you know, different things have different value to different people. Sometimes, you know, as a person that is having sex, that may be sleeping with random partners and doing it all the time purely for exercise or for fun, is that any more valuable in a fertility ritual than somebody who doesn't have sex or that doesn't want children, but they're kind of owning it in their own way? I think we've all got people that we want fertility for, and also we're all also a product of fertility. So you can't really argue with it, can you? Like there's no really kind of getting away from it. Like that's why we're here, kind of thing. So even if it doesn't affect you personally, I think that it's still very valuable for everybody, because it will affect somebody you know, and it has affected you personally at least once, because otherwise you wouldn't be here.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. And I don't mean to skip ahead, but I did want to talk to you about, since we're already kind of touching on that, about people who might identify as being like asexual. And I've had questions to me in the past about this, and how, you know, if there is somebody who practices Wicca and they identify themselves as being asexual, you know, how might they celebrate these fertility rituals with, you know, without having that heavy focus on like sex and like fertilization and that type of thing. You know what I mean? How do you feel about that?
To be honest, I mean, I'm not an asexual person, so I can't speak as a member of the community. Although I did run this past a friend of mine who is an asexual, or certainly identifies as an asexual and a member of that community. And she said that it certainly wasn't offensive what I said. So whether or not it's going to, you know, mesh with everybody, I don't know. I don't see why there is any difference that somebody who is asexual wouldn't want to celebrate a fertility festival. Obviously, there is a vast dynamic and spectrum within asexuality of itself, just like within any sexuality. So it's going to be totally different for everyone. But just because somebody is asexual and they don't necessarily enjoy or wish to partake in sexual intercourse doesn't mean that they can't fall in love. It doesn't mean that they can't have romantic aspects to a relationship. They don't necessarily, you know, it doesn't mean they don't necessarily enjoy snuggling or holding hands. It's just the sexual element. And so there's no reason those people wouldn't want children. And so whether it is to have, you know, artificially inseminated children into your body at some point with a partner, whether you are a couple, whether it's you on your own, or whether it's that you don't identify with any sexuality or sexual nature whatsoever, any form of sexual arousal, but you wish to be a surrogate or something for someone else's baby. You know, there's plenty of ways to celebrate fertility that don't involve sex. And I think that a lot of people that are in relationships where they are having sex, they're not going to celebrate by having sex either. You know, some people will and some people won't. It's totally up to the person. So I don't really personally, I mean, again, like I said, I'm not in that community, but I find lots of elements of Beltane and fertility to be able to be celebrated separate from my own sexuality. And yes, I do have one, but I don't necessarily bring all of those things and link them to my sexuality. So I think that even if you are asexual, then you still have plenty to celebrate. You can still acknowledge that if you weren't here, then that would be because of fertility. You know, like I don't see any difference between, like you said, you don't want children. To me, then there is no difference between you celebrating fertility and someone who is asexual celebrating fertility, because it's not always about the sex. Sex isn't nowadays, especially, how everybody has children. And I think that we do have to modernize with the times. And you know, maybe not everybody feels that way, and that's awesome. They don't have to. But if you are one of these people who don't identify the same way everybody else does, then you should be able to modernize things to suit you. I don't think there's ever a need to feel excluded.
Yes, and I'd like to add to that too, that, you know, we're talking a lot about this in terms of like having sex and like procreating for children and that type of thing. But I would like to add that, to me, fertility can be just the act of creation, like purely just the act of creating anything. So, yeah, you know, if you're a type of person who is creative and in your day-to-day life, you create things, or even if, you know, if you like to cook and you're creating meals to like feed your family, yeah, I think that, all of these, you know, you're giving birth to all of these things, you're bringing these things into existence. And just because there's not a like sexual energy attached to that doesn't make it any less of an act of creation. So that's something that, you know, I just wanted to put out there in case you're looking for ideas on how to celebrate if you identify as an asexual, or, you know, wanted to kind of separate that that sex element from the fertility rituals.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I was about to say, like, when you were saying that anything can be considered creating new life. If you look at like J.K. Rowling and the stuff that she said she was going through her life at the time with her children before she wrote Harry Potter, And she kind of birthed Harry Potter, and that gave new life of its own to so many people. And, you know, that created an energy of its own, and that had nothing to do with sex. You know, so I think fertility can be many, many, many things. And even if it is in the physical of creating a baby, I still don't think fertility has to mean sex anymore.
Cool. I'm glad we talked about that. I think it's time for me to have my my wine time.
Yay!
So,
wine time.
Wine time. In the spirit of celebrating.
Yeah, I've had wine too, if you can't tell everyone.
All right. So, I know this isn't something that I had sent you before, Mandi, but what do you think as far as like deities that are typically associated with this time? I know you mentioned, you know, of course, the god Baal already, but what goddesses would normally be associated with Beltane for like in the Wiccan traditions and everything?
Well, I think it depends what pantheon you follow, what culture you're interested in, and maybe what you come from yourself. Any form of love or fertility goddess. So we could look at Athena, we could look at Freya, who is a love goddess, we could look at you know, the certain aspects of Rhiannon. There are plenty of goddesses that hold those aspects, but they also hold other aspects. And actually something that I was thinking of, and I didn't say, and I'll say it now instead, with the asexuality thing, I think that any human in existence is a representation of the sacred divine masculine and feminine. If they weren't, they wouldn't be here. And so I think that there are lots of gods and goddesses that do link to that kind of time, but they will also link to other things as well. So I think this is kind of one of those festivals where you can really see so many gods and goddesses linking to it, that it isn't necessarily about one or another. I find it very hard to focus on one deity or dual kind of deity system at this time of year, because I feel like they do pronounce themselves in other aspects of the year as well, and they do link in other aspects of the year. But I do think it's very much about anyone who is in their peak, who is in their full. All of the animals that we're looking at this time of year, it's at that strength, it's inner strength, it's physical strength. When we see gods and goddesses at this time of year, they're full bosomed and, you know, like all perky and everything's nice, and all the men have got their big muscles and all of this stuff. And it is very much about that time of your life that you are at your peak, and it's kind of shocking as I've got older, because I can remember, you know, celebrating Beltane when I was like 19, celebrating when I was 23, celebrating when I was 25 and onwards, and like I'm not at that peak anymore. Like I've gone over that peak, and it's so weird to kind of think that and actually see yourself travel through the different stages of the triple goddess and the triple god, and I find that really, really interesting.
That's true. You know, because really, like, whenever you're fairly young when you're at your, like, most fertile, like, childbearing years.
Yeah.
Like, even though most people don't typically have children around that age, and it's almost kind of frowned upon, but really, like, you know, when you're a teenager.
That is when you're most fertile, though. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, years ago, and it's probably why, as twisted as it sounds, it's probably why we still have the maypole done by children, is because years ago the maypole would have been done by virgin women, and they would have been ages like 14, 15 kind of thing at that time, if not even younger in different cultures.
I was gonna say those would be the old ones.
Yeah. So you know, it would have been very different at the time, but it wouldn't have been considered paedophilia or breaking the law or anything like that, because at the time that wasn't an issue. The idea was that if you were a woman, if you had physically you know, started your periods, no regard whatsoever to people that for some medical reason don't have periods or go into early onset menopause, that was just completely disregarded. It was about who was capable of having children. Not necessarily that a period says that, but in that time that's what they thought. And if you were old enough to be having your periods, you were old enough to give birth, and so you were a woman.
Yeah, well, and that's a good point. And especially when like life expectancy was much, much shorter, because I mean the odds of you like dying in childbirth anyways were super high at the time, right?
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah.
especially with such young mothers as well, because a lot of their bodies weren't built to deal with it yet. It's like when a young animal has babies, if a young animal has babies too soon, his body isn't built to deal with looking after them yet, and so they will most likely all die, and so would the animal.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I think it's interesting though that in the wheel of the year, it's the man that gets old and dies and withers and goes into darkness, goes into either death or hibernation or however you want to look at it. You're soggy, Jenny. She's been outside. So yeah, I think that that's really interesting, because in life, it's always been the other way around. It's always been that a woman is useful when she's on her period and until she finishes it. Again, it's a matter of her age. It doesn't matter if there's a reason that she, doesn't have periods in her 30s. It's just that she's useful when she can breed, and men can continue to go on and do that for a very long time. So there is kind of this much more freeing aspect with men in our society, but then in terms of deity, they often get killed off pretty early on. And the same in nature. Men have a rough ride in nature. Like, look at spiders, like hamsters and stuff. Like,
Well, why do you think that is? Why do you think that's a common theme amongst like mythology and that type of thing?
I wouldn't be surprised if that's how it used to be. And then it kind of all got mega strict and mega crazy, because men realized and they weren't having it anymore. And they realized that they were perhaps physically stronger, certainly at the time when women did very little. And also that their wives were most of the time half their age or something like that. So they physically were a lot stronger, especially if their wives were children. And so I guess that was the turning point. And then votes for women and the equality for women didn't come up again for years, for centuries. But I can understand. I think I would find it pretty threatening. And I think a lot of people find it a bit of a turn off with Christianity nowadays, that there is no place for a woman in Christianity. And I think a lot of people, certainly as a deity, I shouldn't say in Christianity, but as a deity, and I think a lot of people find that to be a bit of a turn off, and so they go elsewhere. And maybe that's what it was like for men originally. So we don't know, do we?
No, I guess not. But I was thinking today about, if I had to associate a female deity with this time of year, the one that really comes to me the strongest would be Lilith.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's because it's from like Judeo mythology or whatever, if she doesn't come into play that much because of that. But I mean, obviously she would be like right up front, like the forerunner whenever it comes to like taking charge and like sexual feminine energy and everything like that.
Yeah, I think again it's that perfect blend of Samhain and Beltane. It's that blend of death and life. And I think that's why, again, with Rhiannon, there is that one aspect of her that is love, and that is fertility, and that is femininity, and that is, that very softer kind of side that we do associate with Beltane. But then there is also that death aspect. And I think that when you look at anybody that has had children, there is always that soft loving on the surface, but underneath is like a fierce warrior. Even in people that don't have children, even in people that just have that natural instinct. And I think that warrior aspect, if times were different, that would be what we were taking into battle with us. And so that would be what we associate with death. We are lucky to be in a society where we don't have parents that were, out in the field at some battle or something. Obviously, there are people in the army, but certainly not at kind of these battles of history that we've had, where people would just turn up and you'd have to fight whether you liked it or not, kind of thing. And it wasn't a case of being a soldier, it was a case of just getting involved. Like, maybe that energy has transitioned into something new now, but I definitely think that, you know, there's a big link between the summer and solstice and the winter solstice. There's a big link between the spring equinox and the autumn equinox, and there's a big link between Beltane and between Samhain. There is, I think that kind of, I think there's a lot of questions to ask yourself in terms of what Beltane means to you, by looking at the southern hemisphere if you're in the northern, or the northern if you're in the southern, and asking what different people are celebrating and why, and how those kind of things overlap, because I really think they do. With life comes death and vice versa, and I think that they should kind of be acknowledged together.
Yeah. Well, I noticed so many people seem to celebrate. See, I always celebrated Beltane on the 1st of May, when it was something that I still, you know, really took part in. But now it seems like May's Eve, which seems a little bit more like historically accurate, I guess, has become like the big day to celebrate on, right?
Well, originally, well, as far as we know, originally, I always like to say that because I haven't gone back in history, but as far as I can discover originally, and most authors can that I've seen, we celebrate from the April 30th through till the next day, and a lot of this being solar festival now is about having bonfires, having balefires. You know, this would be the time of the year that was great for divination, to find out who your lover was going to be, or this would be the perfect time to get married or to get engaged, different times like that in nature, because it was all based around unity as well. And you know, originally the kind of sexual aspect of things would be on the 30th of April. So it would all happen at night. There would be a big bonfire, and that would be all the fertility games and the kind of the Virgin giving herself and different things like that. And then May Day would have been the day where the sun was celebrated, and how things were going to change from now on throughout the year, how the earth was celebrated, and that would have been the maypole and everything. So it would have kind of been the sexy bit the night before, and then the kind of more PG version on the 1st of May. And some people still celebrate in a similar way now. They will keep a light burning all night. Some people have a bonfire all night. Some people will light candles all night. Some people will literally just have, you know, like the LED candles, like the ones with the bulb in. They'll keep one of those on all night, or maybe even a night light. You know, it's up to you. You don't have to do it at all. But a lot of people do connect to that idea.
Cool. It always makes me think about, have you ever seen that movie, The Mists of Avalon?
Yeah.
That part where they do like the wild hunt and he comes and like de-virginizes her and everything. Yeah. I always thought that was so cool, even though they were like brother sister, and that was creepy. Yeah. I always really.
Another thing about Beltane, how I'm not sure if it was Beltane Eve as in the day before the 30th, or if it is the 30th, I'm not sure, where the virgins would go and wash their skin with the morning's dew, because it was supposed to have like powers, or make you look youthful and make you look full, and be appealing to the men. And then there was also something to do with mud as well, and covering your body in mud. So I don't know if that was maybe some of the things where we see her in The Mist of Avalon, and she is kind of painted all over. She looks epic. Yes. Oh, I wish I could do that. But yeah, so maybe that's kind of that muddy type of representation. Maybe it's not. But I think it's one of these things that obviously started off as this Gaelic tradition that then spread so many different places, and it's not only spread with one religion, it's spread with lots of different religions within lots of different traditions. So I think that there is going to be some kind of confusion along the way.
Well, let's talk about sex magic, Mandy. What do you think about sex magic?
I think that it's something that can be done with a partner. It's something that can be done alone, and it's something that you do for different reasons. You can do it to raise the vibration of energy. You can do it to cleanse your house, or you can do it to to connect to the god or goddess or both in a different way. If you look at things more from a chaos magician point of view, and you're coming into the different aspects of deity, there are so many ways you can get to know them. You can get to know them as a parent, so you are a child. You can get to know them as a best friend. You can get to know them as a sibling. You can get to know them as a lover. And so you can have somebody with you that represents deity, or you can do it on your own. But it's another way of exploring a relationship with deity. And so I think if you don't feel called to do that, you never have to. It's certainly not a problem. But if you do ever feel called to do that, again, it's your own personal business. No one ever has to know about it. I think that obviously if you are ever in a situation where you've joined a coven and somebody says you have to do this to join in, or you have to, if anybody ever tells you that you have to do something that you're uncomfortable with or you don't want to do it, like, no, you don't. Like, that's ridiculous. And that's very important to remember. There's never an aspect, certainly not nowadays, where you have to have sex to join in with something or to practice a certain religion.
It almost seems like nowadays
way.
that the whole like aspect of like the great rite within covens isn't really as big of a deal as it used to be. I feel like that got really popular in like the late 70s, 80s kind of thing.
I think that with the great rite, I think it was well intended at the time, personally, because you have to think about the fact that there weren't this many people together, and so the people that probably were together and that were doing these things were either in couples or very close. And so I don't think it was initially kind of created to be as dark and as sinister, unless that's me being silly. But I don't think it necessarily was. And then I think it was something that, you know, people started taking advantage of. And because you don't need anything to say you are a certain religion, you can easily pop up somewhere and create almost like a cult of a certain religion that already exists and get people to do what you say. And I think in that scenario, obviously you're never to blame if anything happens, but you do have to keep your wits about you, and you do have to remember that if something doesn't feel right to you, then that's okay. And you know, whether that's genuine or whether it's somebody trying to manipulate you, that's something you have to take into consideration. If you do genuinely need to do this act that you don't wish to do to fit into a new religion, then if you don't want to do it, the religion's not right. That doesn't mean you've done anything wrong, you know. But yeah, I think that nowadays we have no, at the time, people, it was very word of mouth and people needed one another to learn. Nowadays we do that over the internet. We have so much open to us in terms of being solitary that I don't feel we ever really need to do those things. And then also nowadays as well, we have so much more awareness of sex crimes, and I think people are just so much more, I think there's probably a lot of people that have gone through that type of thing without even realizing they went through it. Because
yeah, well, it seems like some of the, I'm sorry, go ahead. What were you saying?
They want to be part of something, but if they do, they have been through it without realizing they have.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that I almost feel that when some of these traditions were starting out, like the British traditional Wicca and that type of thing was first starting out, it was almost more of like a secret society kind of thing. So they would have these like really heavy initiations or whatever, because like you said, it was more of a select group of people, and it wasn't widely known to everybody. So that it was a little more cultish, like culty in a way.
I think with anything like that, you have to consider that in different cultures, the laws were different, and the laws were different back then. If you got caught practicing something, you could either be killed or you could go to jail. And so the idea, I guess, of being as close to somebody as you can possibly be by actually having sex with somebody, you're creating a bond with that person, that everything that you share will be kept confidential and vice versa, because this really could be the end of your life if the people in your coven started talking.
That's
I'm
a
going to be
wonderful
really,
point.
really rude. I'm sorry, I need to go to the toilet and I need to let the dog out again. So if I can be gone for like 3 to 5 minutes,
Absolutely.
then I'll pop back up when I'm back.
No, that sounds great. No, I think that is what she just said about it being a way to hold a certain kind of bond with somebody that would be kind of the ultimate bond, whereas if you were going to get in trouble, you had this secret with this person. Oh, I can't even express it as good as that she just said, but that makes a whole lot of sense, having heard that. I think there is a fine line whenever it comes to that now, and I want to talk about, I think a few years ago, there was a place which was supposedly a like spiritual healing type center, and I want to say this was in Texas. I can't be exactly certain, but I want to say it's in Texas. But they got busted. There was this huge raid on this spiritual center, and they got busted for prostitution, basically. And it's because, and I really don't feel like they were like just full on like prostituting people. Like I feel like they probably did think that they were doing something spiritual. And somebody say something if you remember this, but it was women who were healing people through different types of sexual acts. Like that's what they said, and I think they like stood by that for a while, even like while they were being prosecuted and everything. But I think that this is something, I think sex magic is great. I think that's fine if you have, a consenting partner, if you're of age and you want to do that with somebody, I think that's great. But I think that it can be a little scary for younger people who are maybe, a little bit naive starting out. If maybe you get into a group with people who are much older than you, and like she said, you want to fit in and they're trying to pressure you into something like that, I think you definitely want to stay away from that type of situation. Absolutely. Because it's not something, you should never have to have sex with somebody ever if you don't want to for any reason whatsoever. So let me just make that very clear. But as far as like sex magic and using sexual acts to perform magic, she brought up chaos magicians, and that is one of the first places that I learned about sex magic. And I believe if you look at, I don't have it up here. What is the name of that book? It's by Peter Carroll. He wrote one of the first books, I think it's Peter Carroll, about chaos magic. Somebody help me out.
The Psychonaut?
Yes. Psychonaut. And I think it was brought up in that book whenever there was a chapter discussing making and charging sigils, basically, right?
Yeah.
And so it explained, once you made your sigil, the way that you would charge it was to basically masturbate by yourself, and at the point of climax, you would send that energy into the sigil that you had created. And I think that is one of the most like simplistic ways ever to explain how magic works, basically, or how to think about how magic works. And
yeah.
I think that ties in really well with what we've been talking about as far as Beltane and all of that, and as far as like using sex as a tool to make magic, basically, or cast spells or anything like that. I think that's the best way to describe how you would go about doing that. And whether or not you have a partner, I mean, it's great if you do, it's great if you don't, it's whatever. But I think sex magic is like one of the easiest ways to like cast spells personally, if you have that available to you.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's part of your self-love journey as well, that love and acceptance. And rose quartz is fantastic to use at Beltane for anybody who wants to incorporate crystals into their ritual or working. But I think when it comes to magic and sex, you have to have your wits about you. Like I said before, it's never your fault if anybody forces themselves on you, but you do need to have your wits about you, and you need to think to yourself, has any other part of magic ever, any other spell working, any other ritual called for me to be this vulnerable with anybody that wasn't me and wasn't the universe or wasn't the god and goddess? Because I doubt you'll find that it's a yes. And I think that that's a brilliant way to kind of sum up what's okay and what's not okay in terms of sex magic is, would you be that open to something in any other aspect of your life or in any other magical working? And if not, then it doesn't have to go that far. Sex magic doesn't even have to be physical masturbation. It can be arousing thoughts and using that energy. So you never even have to go that far. And there is the aspect of sex magic that is purely about gender and identifying gender and stuff, which for some people, maybe they don't identify with one gender, and in that case then it's going to be difficult for them, and then other people it's going to be easy for them. So I think that there's different elements of sex magic for everyone, whoever you are, and whatever your kind of romantic status or your status. I think there's something for everybody.
Yeah, well, and I think it kind of gets a bad rap too because of the fact that so many people are brought up in an Abrahamic religion where we're basically taught that sex is bad unless you're trying to have a child, right? Unless you're trying to procreate. Anything that you do by yourself or with another person is kind of like an ungodly act. And I think that sometimes it can be really hard to get past that indoctrination that we're, grow up with. And, to some people, especially if they might be starting out and, new to witchcraft or something like that, it might be kind of hard to get past that, oh, I'm doing something bad. And, this, it can be very uncomfortable if you have that mentality still, if you haven't let go of that mentality like fully.
I think if you look throughout history, even if you look at our modern TV shows today, there is this idea that having sex, as you said, is something that happens between a man and a woman in marriage to create a baby. And any other time it's purely sinful. The idea of having sex for God is absolutely barbaric. And it's seen as so sinful. And then in so many TV shows, there's this idea of witchcraft being selling your soul to Satan and somehow having sex with Satan. And I think that, for people that are hearing about witchcraft the first time from the angle of a TV show, are quite possibly coming at the idea of sex magic that involves like sleeping with Satan and selling your soul or something like that. So I do think it sounds really dodgy, doesn't it? Like it sounds like something we shouldn't be talking about. But when you actually look at what it is, it's just another way of, of raising energy. And it's also another way of connecting with the universe. And that's all it ever needs to be, really. It doesn't ever need to be anything else unless you're comfortable with it.
That's true. And I think that just like you were saying about how anything other than procreating is sinful, I mean, if you look back to images of like the witchcraft trials and that type of thing, a lot of times they'll have these depictions of witches that are naked. There's always nudity, and they're always, flying nude to, like you said, join the devil and have sex with demons and that kind of thing. And they're saying that like that's a bad thing. And I think that, we should get over that.
No, I think it's I think it's all based on personal opinion. And if when you hear sex magic it makes you shudder and you don't have a desire to look into that, You don't need to. You never need to know what that means, I don't think, anymore, unless you feel called to. It is something, when you look at the different aspects of how you can connect with deity, it is something that you can do, and it works. But if you don't feel any desire to do that, you never need to, or I don't think so.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that unless it's something that you want to do, it's not something that's absolutely necessary. You know, otherwise
No,
you can't call yourself a witch if you don't have, you know,
no.
some type of sex
Well, and also
magic.
there is the idea of being of celebrating these different festivals and these different things at different ages. For example, if you're part of a long line of witches, and you know, you're raising your children as witches, which I'm not saying anybody should or anybody shouldn't. You know, you're not necessarily going to be able to stop them reading about stuff like sex magic. Do you want your children to be involved in sex magic? No. But that doesn't mean that their path is any less fulfilled or experienced than yours, because it's their path. And when they do come to it, if they choose to come to it, it'll be totally different from any experience anybody's had before. So I just think it really has to kind of scan globally in terms of all the different ages and all the different people that we're talking about, because what somewhere might be something lovely and safe between a married couple, somewhere else could be something quite horrific. And so I think it's very, especially when you're talking about Wiccan sexual magic, I think that you have to have an idea in mind previously of what that actually means, and that would be to go along with the Wiccan read, for example. Whereas witchcraft, sex magic can mean lots and lots of different things, because there is no read that necessarily everybody is following.
Yeah. Well, would you say in that instance, do you think that a person could partake in sex magic without their partner being aware of it?
Yeah, because you know, you're raising, like, say that you are the person that is aware and your partner is not, you're raising a vibrational frequency for you to use. You're using the other person as a tool to do that. So it's, in terms of morals, it's about how you feel. You know, were you going to be doing that with that person anyway, in which case it doesn't make any difference? Or is that something that you're doing personally, like literally just to use that person for that sake? In that case, I would say that's not a very nice thing to do, especially if they're not aware of it. If they're aware, go for it. But if it's you and like a partner, that's something that you're going to be experiencing together anyway, then you're wasting the opportunity if you don't.
Cool.
Cool.
Good answer.
Good answer. Well, that's how I see it. I don't know. I'm not sure how people, I guess it would depend. If, for example, you were dating somebody who was totally against playing any part in witchcraft whatsoever because they were a very strict religion themselves, then maybe doing it would be naughty, because they might not be happy with the fact that they helped you raise the energy to perform any form of magic. But at the same time, I can't imagine somebody like that wanting to be in a relationship with you if they truly know you and know what you do. Even if they don't want to partake in it, they understand that it happens within their house. So I can't fully understand. I don't know. I think it's okay. I've done it. It's what I mean. Like, I don't know.
Well, I think it's all right. And like you said, I've done it as well before too. And like you said, as long as that's something that you're comfortable with, like morally, you know, as long as you don't feel like you're using the person in a negative way, I guess. You know, whatever it is you're comfortable with. But no, I just thought that would be a good question, because, you know, a lot of times a lot of people are in the closet with their partners just starting out. And but I find that typically if you have a partner who isn't very involved but doesn't care either way, sex magic is always a good way to get them involved in what it is you're doing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
most of the time they're up for that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's exactly the same as them cooking for you on one of the Sabbats, or them helping you decorate your altar, or maybe building something that you can, use for your altar, and feeling they're included in that way. Yeah, it's just another aspect. I think if your partner wouldn't mind, if you haven't told them because they wouldn't mind, so you literally didn't need to mention it because it was something you thought about last minute, cool. If you feel like if you told them they'd say no, then that's probably when you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, agreed. Now, I know my husband, he looks forward to most of the fire festivals for that reason. He is not opposed to anything like that.
We all know what Mag is doing tonight.
Yeah, I guess.
Whereas I'm totally the opposite, because I have this superstition that if you have sex on a fertility festival, you could get pregnant. So I'm just like, nope.
I've never thought about that. I have never ever thought about that. But I'm all right so far. So far, so good. So just safe kids. Practice safety.
Yeah, I worry. I think, like, what if I took all the precautions in the world and it still happened? I'd be like, Beltane.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I guess because that's never been like my intention. I've never really worried about it. I generally I have something, a goal in mind or something that I want to aim that energy towards anyway. So maybe because I'm using it for that, I'm not allowing it to come back to me.
Yeah. You have to remember to put a sigil on his face so that's all you focus on.
That's right.
Oh, funny.
Well, that's all the questions I have. Did you have anything that you wanted to talk about, Mandy?
What are you doing for Beltane? I'm frightened to ask now.
I'm not sure. I haven't really, like I said, normally, typically I celebrate May the 1st. So, but I haven't really thought about it. I don't really do like a whole bunch of ritual, but a lot of times I'll take the time to do some type of offerings or something like that to like the spirits and stuff that I work with. That's generally what I do. I like to have fires, but now that I live in an apartment complex, I can't really do that. Yeah. So probably just light some candles and, give a few offerings, that kind of thing. That's about what it looks like for me.
That sounds nice.
Yeah.
I'm doing well, after I've done this with you tonight, me and Alexi are going to watch a film. I'm not sure what we're going to watch. I kind of want to push for Mists of Avalon, but I think I'll be pushing my luck. It's a long one. Yeah. So I'm not sure. But he does like all that type of thing. So I think that maybe, I don't know.
Just get to the good part.
Yeah, we all know what the good part is. So like when she actually gets there. So yeah. But I don't know, maybe that. And then either tomorrow, I haven't decided yet, because I quite like to do a ritual tomorrow. I've got my altar and everything set up at home, and I'm not at home, so I'm not sure if I want to wait until I get home. But then I don't know the exact date I'm going home, and I don't want it to feel like too late and then I've missed it. Yeah. So I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I haven't decided yet. Oh, and the books that I wanted to recommend at the beginning.
Oh yes, please do that.
There is a book called Seasons of Witchery, Celebrating the Sabbats. That's by Ellen Dugan. That's a real. It's not simple in terms of how it's written, but it's simple into, if you're a beginner, you'll understand. And then the other one, and I rate this book so highly, and it's actually designed for people with children. It's by Starhawk, and it's called Circle Round. And it's brilliant if you have either a non-pagan partner or you have children and you want to create activities that you can kind of do with these people where they can be part of your kind of craft without actually being in it in any way, just so they feel included. And there's different recipes and different activities for all the Sabbats that you can do. But there's also a story of the god and goddess that goes along throughout the entire year and what's happening with the god and goddess at that time, aimed for children. And I think that's so lovely, whether it's for children or whether it's just for a beginner. I think it's really, really nice. I really, I don't have kids and I really like that book. I don't have a copy of it anymore, but I highly recommend it. I've got loads of ideas from that book in terms of activities and stuff, and I don't even have kids, so I highly recommend that.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Mandy. Well,
thank you.
I think that's everything for this evening. because I know you have stuff you want to do, and it's late for you there. So I want to thank everybody for coming and watching live with us, and I want to thank Mandi for coming and being so awesome and answering so many questions. Oh, and share, tell us your book again too. Tell us the title of your book where they can find it and everything.
This is my book. It's called Eclectic Wicca: A Guide for the Modern Witch. I had to check what it was called then. That's what it looks like. It's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, but then you can also get it at different bookshops and stuff as well.
Cool. And I'll make sure I'll put a link to that as well for you, Mandi. But all the links for Mandi's her website and her YouTube channel and her Instagram account are all in the description box. So you guys can check that out. And I think this video will stay up. The other one did. So I hope this one will stay up. So if you have any questions or comments after we've done this, you can still ask those and we'll try and get back with you. But thank you, Mandi, for coming hanging out with me.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Well, bye, you guys. I love you all.
Bye.